You're walking through a quarter-acre kitchen garden behind a farmhouse in Stark County, Ohio, in the third week of August. And what you are looking at should not be possible by any metric the modern agricultural industry uses to measure productive land. 47 vegetable varieties growing simultaneously in an area roughly the size of a doubles tennis court. No bare soil visible anywhere. No irrigation system. The soil underneath your boots is dark, loose, and damp 4 inches down, despite 9 rainless days at 88 degrees. The woman who tends this garden spends 90 minutes a day on it. Her family of 7 has not purchased a single vegetable from any store for 23 consecutive years. A university comparison study placed this garden against a 2-acre commercially managed plot in the same county during 2016 and 2017. The Amish quarter-acre outproduced it in total caloric yield per input hour by 340%. The commercial plot had irrigation, synthetic fertilizer, and mechanized cultivation. The Amish garden had none of those things. The study was never published. The 2 largest funders were seed companies whose varieties had been part of the comparison. The agronomist now teaches at a small college in Vermont. He sent me the raw data. Here is the number that changes everything. The global seed industry is worth $63 billion annually. Synthetic fertilizer adds $200 billion. Agricultural chemicals add $130 billion more. Nearly $400 billion per year spent on inputs for a system that a quarter-acre garden in Stark County outperforms by a factor of 3 using inputs that cost nothing. Every technique on this list either eliminates a purchased input entirely or replaces it with something the garden produces for free. Here are the 20 most essential ones. 1. Save your own seed. The Amish grow exclusively open-pollinated heritage varieties and save seed from their strongest plants every season. Each generation is naturally selected for your specific soil, microclimate, and pest pressure. After 3 to 5 generations of selection, a saved seed line outperforms any commercial variety bred for industrial monoculture conditions. Seed companies sell you a new packet every year because saved seed is seed they will never sell you again. The Amish have been maintaining the same lines for generations, and those varieties now carry decades of site-specific adaptation that no commercial breeding program can replicate for your particular garden. 2. Never leave bare soil. Bare soil loses value every hour it sits exposed. Rain impact causes surface crusting that reduces water infiltration by up to 60%. Evaporation removes moisture that covered soil retains. Weed seeds germinate because bare soil provides the light exposure they require. The Amish cover every square inch at all times with either a living plant, a mulch layer, or a cover crop. This single practice accounts for more of the productivity gap between the Stark County garden and the commercial comparison plot than any other individual technique on this list. It costs nothing and requires only the decision to never leave ground uncovered. 3. Deep wood chip mulch. A 4-inch layer of wood chip mulch reduces surface evaporation by up to 70%, moderates soil temperature by 8 to 12 degrees Fahrenheit, feeds soil fungal networks as it decomposes, and suppresses weed germination by blocking the light that triggers weed seed activation. The Amish source chips from local tree services that pay for disposal and frequently deliver a full truckload, free to anyone willing to receive it. The soil beneath a continuously mulched bed changes character visibly within 2 years, becoming darker, looser, and more biologically active than any unmulched soil in the same garden, regardless of what amendments are added elsewhere. 4. Permanent no-till beds. Every rototiller pass destroys fungal high-fall networks that connect plant root systems, disrupts soil aggregate structure built over years of biological activity, and brings weed seeds from depth up to the germination zone. The Amish establish permanent beds with permanent paths and never cultivate across the entire garden area. Growing beds are never walked on. After 5 years of no-till management, the soil reaches a structural complexity that tilled soil cannot match regardless of inputs. The mycorrhizal network alone, which can extend a single plant's effective root reach by up to 1,000 times, represents a nutrient acquisition capacity no synthetic fertilizer program can economically replicate. 5. Compost T-soil drench. Finished compost steeped in unchlorinated water for 24 to 48 hours with gentle aeration produces a liquid dense with beneficial bacteria, fungi, and nematodes that inoculates root zones with biological activity, making nutrients immediately available to plants. The mechanism is not direct nutrition, but biological facilitation. A 2007 study in applied soil ecology found compost tea increased plant biomass by an average of 22% compared to untreated controls across multiple crop species. The Amish apply it at transplanting and monthly through the season. The input cost is a handful of compost and a bucket of water, nothing more. 6. 3-week succession planting. A single planting of lettuce produces a 2-week harvest window before bolting. Plant everything at once and you get 2 weeks of abundance followed by nothing. The Amish plant 1/3 of any fast-maturing crop every 3 weeks, producing a rolling harvest across the entire season. The same bed area on a 3-week cycle yields 3 times the seasonal output of the same area planted all at once, with no additional space, no additional inputs, and no additional labor beyond making smaller plantings more frequently. This single scheduling adjustment accounts for a significant portion of the 340% productivity differential documented in the Stark County comparison. 7. Companion planting through observation. The 3 sisters of corn, beans, and squash represent only the entry point of a practice that extends through every bed in a mature Amish garden. Corn provides structure for bean vines. Beans fix atmospheric nitrogen that feeds the corn. Squash leaves shade the soil, retaining moisture and suppressing weeds simultaneously. Basil near tomatoes reduces thrip populations through volatile compound emission. Dill near brassicas attracts parasitic wasps that parasitize cabbage worm larvae. The Amish arrive at these combinations not through reading charts, but through decades of watching what happens when specific plants grow near each other and planting more of what consistently works. 8. Stinging nettle fertilizer tea. Nettles submerged in a covered container of water for 14 days produce through anaerobic fermentation a liquid fertilizer with nitrogen content between 0.5 and 1% by volume, comparable to diluted commercial liquid nitrogen fertilizer, along with iron, magnesium, potassium, and calcium. The Amish grow nettles deliberately along fence lines as permanent infrastructure rather than weeds to eliminate. The finished tea is diluted 10-to-1 before application to avoid nitrogen burn. The smell during fermentation is extreme. The results are not subtle. Plants treated with nettle tea show measurably accelerated leaf development within 1 week of application at an input cost of exactly 0. 9. Comfrey as a nutrient pump. Comfrey roots penetrate 6 feet into the subsoil, accessing mineral layers far below vegetable crop roots. Harvested leaves contain nitrogen at 1.8% dry weight, phosphorus at 0.5%, and potassium at 5.3%, comparable to balanced commercial fertilizer across all 3 primary nutrients. Applied as mulch around heavy feeding crops, comfrey leaves decompose rapidly and release those minerals into the surface root zone within 2 to 3 weeks. The Amish plant it as permanent bed edge infrastructure, harvesting 4 to 6 times per season as it regrows vigorously after each cutting. Established once from a root division, it requires no replanting and no maintenance beyond the harvest itself for decades. 10. Hugelkultur, buried wood beds. Rotting hardwood logs buried beneath raised bed soil act as a sponge, absorbing rainfall and releasing it slowly during dry periods. A bed built over buried wood maintains root zone moisture 2 to 3 times longer than a conventional bed following the same rainfall event. As the wood decomposes over years, it contributes organic matter and nutrients continuously without external addition. The Amish build these beds from logs too rotted to burn, material with no other productive use on the farm. The Stark County Garden's 9-day drought performance during 88-degree August heat is largely attributable to hugelkultur beds installed 15 years ago, still actively moderating soil moisture. 11. Wood ash amendment. Wood ash from the kitchen stove contains potassium at 3 to 7% by dry weight, calcium carbonate at 25 to 45%, and trace magnesium, phosphorus, and micronutrients. Applied around brassica plants at 1 cup per square foot, it raises local soil pH, provides immediately available potassium and creates an alkaline surface environment that deters soil-dwelling larvae of cabbage root fly and other brassica pests. Applied to potato beds before planting it reduces scab incidence. The Amish produce wood ash as an unavoidable byproduct of cooking and heating every single day. They purchase no lime. They purchase no potassium amendment. Both arrive in a bucket from the stove every morning at zero cost. 12. Daily morning observation walk. The Amish gardener walks every bed every morning before any work begins, not to weed or harvest, simply to observe. This 10 to 15-minute practice catches every problem at its earliest stage. A single aphid colony on day 1 is removed by hand in 30 seconds. The same colony on day 7 requires significant intervention. Early nitrogen deficiency showing as slight lower leaf yellowing can be addressed immediately with a compost tea drench. The same deficiency found 3 weeks later has already cost weeks of productive growth. Leaf posture, color, texture, and insect presence all communicate information that an attentive observer reads fluently after 1 season of daily practice. The Amish develop this fluency as children, walking the garden with grandparents who name what they see and explain what it means. 13. Trap cropping. Blue Hubbard squash planted at the garden perimeter draws squash vine borers, cucumber beetles, and squash bugs away from higher-value cucurbit crops through volatile attractant compounds. Nasturtiums at garden borders attract aphids preferentially over vegetable crops. The trap plant concentrates pest populations where they can be removed or where their damage is acceptable because the plant was grown specifically to be sacrificed. The Amish manage pest pressure by directing pest behavior through plant selection rather than killing pests after they have colonized the crop. This approach improves in effectiveness every season as the gardener refines which trap crops work for their specific pest population, progressively eliminating the need for any chemical intervention. 14. Cold frame season extension. A scrap lumber frame topped with salvaged window glass creates a microclimate 10 to 15 degrees warmer than ambient air during daylight hours and reduces radiant heat loss from plants and soil by 40 to 60% at night. The combined effect extends the growing season by 4 to 6 weeks at each end, equivalent to moving the garden 200 miles further south and adding 60 to 90 additional frost-free growing days annually. The Amish build cold frames from farm repair lumber and window glass from farmhouse renovations. Cost is zero when materials come from on-farm waste streams. Recurring cost after construction is also zero, making this the highest return on investment of any season extension technology available at any price. 15. Forest mycorrhizal soil inoculation. Mycorrhizal fungi extend plant root reach through hyphal networks that access water and phosphorus in soil pores too small for roots to enter. In garden soil that has been tilled, treated with synthetic fertilizer, or had fungicide applied, these populations are dramatically reduced or absent. The Amish inoculate new beds by incorporating 1 shovelful of topsoil from the base of established trees in adjacent woodland per square yard, worked into the top 3 inches. This introduces the full diversity of locally adapted mycorrhizal species at no cost. Plants develop these associations within 2 to 3 weeks of transplanting and access resources through the extended network throughout the season in ways that commercial inoculant products attempt to replicate at significant cost, with a fraction of the species diversity present in that single shovelful of forest floor. 16. Garlic perimeter. Planting. Allicin and sulfur compounds released through garlic root exudates deter soil-dwelling pests, including root aphids, wireworms, and fungus gnats, continuously through the root zone without any application or timing consideration beyond initial planting. Above ground, volatile sulfur compounds from the foliage deter aphids, spider mites, and Japanese beetles from colonizing neighboring plants. The Amish treat garlic as structural infrastructure rather than a crop grown in isolation. The bulb harvest at season's end is a secondary benefit of a planting whose primary function is season-long pest management. They replant immediately from the largest cloves of the harvest, maintaining the perimeter continuously across generations without a single external seed purchase. 17. Vertical growing. Pole beans on rough-cut wooden posts produce 3 to 4 times the yield of bush beans in the same ground footprint by accessing airspace above the bed. Cucumbers trained vertically produce straighter fruit with less fungal disease because air circulation prevents the moisture accumulation that plagues sprawling plants on bare soil. Indeterminate tomatoes trained to a single vertical stem and pruned of all lateral shoots produce earlier. Larger fruit because the plant's full energy goes into fruit development rather than vegetative expansion. The Amish use poles from farm woodlots and natural fiber twine at zero material cost. The yield increase per square foot from vertical growing is large enough that the Stark County productivity numbers cannot be understood without accounting for it. 18. Earthworm population building. Each common earthworm processes approximately its own body weight in soil daily. A healthy population of 25 to 30 worms per square foot processes and improves the entire top 6 inches of bed soil continuously throughout the growing season, depositing castings that improve structure, drainage, and fertility at every point along each burrowing path. The Amish build these populations by never tilling, maintaining continuous organic surface mulch, and applying kitchen scraps directly to bed surfaces where earthworms consume them from below. They never apply synthetic fertilizer, which changes soil osmotic conditions in ways that cause earthworm populations to decline and migrate. A bed managed for earthworm population for 5 consecutive years develops soil structure that no tillage or synthetic amendment can produce because it is built by millions of organisms working continuously, rather than by any single intervention. 19. 7-year crop rotation. The standard recommendation is a 3 to 4 year rotation. The Amish practice a 7-year cycle that allows complete biological reset of every bed position across a period long enough for soil-borne pathogen populations to collapse from host deprivation. Clubroot, which devastates brassica crops, requires a living host to maintain viability. After 7 years without a brassica host, spore populations drop below the damage threshold. The same principle applies to white rot in alliums, fusarium in tomatoes, and sclerotinia in lettuce. The system requires careful record-keeping in annual hand-drawn garden maps. The record is the system. Without it, the rotation is guesswork. With it, it is a disease management program more effective than any chemical treatment because it eliminates the pathogen's ability to persist rather than merely suppressing its symptoms. 20. The notebook. Every technique on this list lives in handwritten notebooks that Amish gardeners maintain across decades of continuous practice. Planting dates, harvest yields, pest observations, weather correlations, variety performance, and companion planting results are recorded season by season in books that become more valuable with every entry because they record the specific behavior of a specific piece of ground under specific management over time. After 20 years of entries, such a notebook contains information about that garden that no extension publication, no seed catalog, and no online resource can provide because it exists nowhere else on Earth. The Amish pass these notebooks to the next generation as seriously as they pass the land itself. The 340-page notebook in the Stark County farmhouse has 40 years of entries. Its owner said the first 10 years are the least useful because the gardener was still learning to observe accurately. The last 10 are the most dense because the garden has become legible in ways it simply was not at the beginning. He said it the way a man describes learning a language, slowly at first, then fluently, then in ways you cannot explain to someone who hasn't spent the same years listening. Drop your state in the comments. Tell me what you grow, how much space you have, and what your biggest garden challenge is, because every one of those challenges has an answer somewhere on this list, and most of those answers have been sitting in plain sight in Amish kitchen gardens across Ohio and Pennsylvania for longer than the industry that profits from your not knowing them has existed. Next week, I'm going to show you how the Amish feed their chickens for $1.25 a week, while commercial poultry operations spend 60 to 70% of their entire production budget on purchased grain feed. A poultry science researcher at Purdue University spent 2 seasons documenting the Amish feeding system in LaGrange County, Indiana, and calculated that eggs from Amish-fed hens exceeded commercially fed hens in omega-3 content by 340%, and vitamin D content by 600%. Her department declined to publish the findings. The Grain Industry Trade Association had provided $2.3 million in research funding to her university in the previous 3 years. The chickens in LaGrange County have kept eating the same way regardless, and next week, you're going to find out exactly what they've been eating.